Football. You know, nothing quite says fall like the kickoff and start of the football season. Because it's something about the crisp air combined with the football stadium and the lights and the bleachers with the band playing and the cheerleaders cheering and the football players on the field with their cute little jerseys, combined with the life-altering injuries, the concussions, and the CTE, and most importantly, the capitalistic greed at the expense of men's mental and physical well-being. Football. What's not to love? Football culture and the movie Him. Okay, no, but can we talk about this one, y'all?
Oh, can we talk? Can we talk about it? Can we talk? Can we talk about it? Can we talk? Can we talk about it? Can we talk? Can we talk about it?
Hey y'all, it's your girl Cindy Noir, and welcome back to another episode of my show, The Cindy Noir Show. This is a topic that I am honestly intrigued and excited to speak on. Mind you, I'm not the biggest sports girly, but when it comes to the culture of football in America, there's so much to talk about beyond just the sport, and I think that my opinions and thoughts on the topic still pertain. Now, if you are wanting the full unfiltered episode of this podcast, then be sure to join my Patreon, the Can We Talk crew, because they're the ones who get it all. And if you're watching this episode on my YouTube or listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, trust me when I say there is a lot that I'm leaving out on purpose. So if you're wanting to know the full gist of what I feel on this topic, then be sure to join my Patreon. But now that we've gotten that out the way, without further ado, let's go ahead and hop into today's topic, shall we? Now, this is your only warning. This episode will include hella spoilers in reference to the movie Him. If you have not seen it yet and you want to, go watch it before you watch this episode. Because in this episode, I will be getting into all the things that happened in the movie. You've been forewarned. So let's talk about football culture here in America. Because if I'm not mistaken, football is one of the core aspects of American culture. Now, on the shallow side, I do enjoy football, as in I enjoy the distractions from the game of football itself. Meaning, I pretty much enjoy everything that does not involve the actual football game, right? But when it comes to the actual game of football, yeah, not the biggest fan. Now, one thing I do indeed love about football is the football physique on a man. What can I say? I have a little type when it comes to the male species. I like that broad shoulder, thick neck. Something about that thick neck just does something to me. Good times. All right, focus. And you know, while I often enjoy watching the NFL men's booties in them football suits run up and down the field, the reality is the few positives that I experience in football do not outweigh the immense negatives. Because when I am not distracted by the distractions of football, I have to reckon with the reality of what football is to me, which is violence. Football is quite literally a game of men on opposite teams using their bodies in violent ways to get the ball on opposite ends of the field. To me, football games feel like modern day gladiator battles that would happen in Rome back in the day. And when you look at the fact that football stadiums mirror coliseums, the only real difference is that, unlike back in the day, football games nowadays aren't a battle to the death in the same game. I'm not the biggest fan of the sport. I'm just not. To be fair, I was never the biggest fan of football, but watching Will Smith's Concussion, which is a movie about Dr. Bennett Omalu and his creation of the CTE diagnosis, that changed me fundamentally in my viewpoint of football. I was never the same. But let's really get into why I'm not a fan of football, and let's start with the fact that in order to make it to NFL, most NFL players had to begin playing football as children, which means the amount of life they've experienced being exposed to the injury and violence of football is more than they have not. I do not like the normalization of this kind of violence towards boys at such a young age. I don't think that's teaching them the right kind of values. When it comes to football, there is no way to get through it unscathed. There is no way you're going to spend the majority of your life from youth all the way to adulthood playing football every year and not sustain one injury. You're going to get burned at some point. The goal is just to get burned as little as possible, but you're still getting burned. I feel that football reinforces the idea that men are machines and not human beings who are sensitive to injury, and starting them out with that conditioning at a young age, to me, is just not healthy. The next thing that I don't like about football is as the boys get older and enter middle and high school, if they show promise as football athletes and stars, education becomes either a secondary priority or not a priority at all. It bothers me that if a football player displays merit and promise to be in the NFL, there is no longer an emphasis on a plan B or plan C. The only plan is football. And to me, that is not smart because football isn't forever. And if the college athlete is lucky enough to make it to the NFL, I don't like the NFL draft. It gives slave auction. Just picture a sea of white football franchise owners looking at black men's teeth, their physique, their body, to see how good they are, how fit they are for their team. I can't see anything than a slave auction. And I'm going to get into this point further in the episode, but part of why the NFL draft is so cringy to me and why it reminds me of a slave auction is because a lot of football, to me, is rooted in white supremacy, which makes sense because football is rooted in American culture, and a lot of American culture is white supremacy. And my issue once you become an actual NFL player is you spend all of your life preparing for this moment. You got the contract, you're making the millions, you are in the NFL, and the reality of it is you have given so much of your life to this game, to this sport, to really only benefit some old white man watching in a skybox. You don't get lifelong health insurance through the NFL. You don't get a lifelong retirement plan from the NFL. You don't get shit once you're done with them. And so the next issue I have is the frustration that these men experience in having those injuries or being kicked out by the NFL and not having a plan B, is the amount of violence that these NFL players take out on their families and their wives. And while it is unfortunate that the NFL treats their players so poorly, it is not fair to the families of these players to receive the brunt of that poor treatment through the act of domestic violence. We have seen countless domestic violence scenarios amongst football athletes and their wives. And I'm more inclined to feel that way, especially when we think about the fact that domestic violence rates are the highest on Super Bowl night. These men bet on their football teams on Super Bowl night, and when their team loses, they take it out on their wives. The exact same way that these football athletes take out losing in football on their wives. So all in all, based off of all these reasonings, I don't like football. The amount of violence the game promotes and produces, to me, does not outweigh the few positives that I experience in watching the distractions of the game. Now that I've cleared that part up, let's get into the movie Him. First and foremost, the main stars of the movie are Marlon Wayans and Tyreek Withers. You know, when it comes to the press circuit of this movie, I feel like everyone is talking way too much about how fine Tyreek Withers is and not talking enough about how fine Marlon Wayans is. So allow me to do that. When I tell you Marlon has been fine my whole life, I mean that. Okay? Every time Marlon arches that eyebrow when he's getting serious, my nipples get a little hard. Ooh, Marlon. And Sir Wayans, if you see this, and I hope you do, just know, sir, that while the masses was looking at Tyreek Ford, I was looking at you. Because you and that dangle earring had me feeling things. Tyreek Withers, he's fine, but he's the kind of fine that I don't want to admit to. He's a privileged fine. Tyreek Withers, it's like, yeah, you fine. Damn. All right. The thing about Tyreek is he is biracial in every sense of the word. Right when I'm like, ooh, Tyreek, he'll do a thing or have the rhythm, and it's like, oh, there's the Withers. Now, with this movie review, I'm not going in order of the movie. I am just going to talk about the different themes I noticed throughout the movie and pinpoint the scenes that I think reinforce those themes. Let's get into it. The overall theme of the movie Him to me is the question, what does it take to be him? In the game of football, what does it take? What does a man have to do to be able to say, I'm him, and nobody object? What does it take to be a man that the masses not only respect, but that other men aspire to and want to emulate or replace even? And to me, this movie shows that what it takes for a man to be him is an immense level of inhumane sacrifice and self-abandonment, aka not a damn thing that is actually healthy or good for you. The movie starts off with Cam watching Isaiah play football and break his leg. I'm talking leg dangling in the air. Leg just hanging and dangling. Not a care in the world. And Cam's dad comes up to Cam as a kid and says, that's what it means to be a man. That's what real men do. So you're going to align sacrifice and what it takes to be a real man to a man damn near breaking his leg in two for a football team. It gives that what it takes to be him is to abandon and not care about anybody, including yourself. And if that's what it takes to be considered him, is being considered him worth it? Theme 2 is sacrifice. There was a reoccurring theme of sacrifice throughout the movie between the goat heads, the killing of animals, the rituals about sacrifice. There were those themes. The fact that in order to be him, you have to sacrifice any and everything, including yourself. They even sacrificed Cam's dad. They killed Cam's dad. So at the end of the movie, we see a picture of Cam and his dad with the owner of the Saviors football team. Earlier in the movie, Cam talks about the fact that the last thing he said to his dad was that he was done with football, giving it up. And a few weeks later, his dad was dead. Now, going back to the end of the movie, the same owner of the Saviors team said, we'll kill your family. First of all, they have had their eyes on Cam since he was a kid. They've been plotting on Cam since he was a kid. So when Cam tried to deviate and claimed to no longer want to do football, who do you think stepped in to get him back on track? They killed Cam's dad in an effort to create an emotional tie to the game, an allegiance to the game, and an obligation to the game that he didn't have prior to. Within the theme of sacrifice, there is a theme of sacrificing your humanity. I think in order to be him, you have to reach a point of being inhumane. And that is shown in the scene of Cam running the scrimmage of football, and he headbutts into another black male athlete. He knocks down the other black male athlete, and it is clear that him knocking him down like that caused brain injury. And to me, that was symbolism of, it's either I go down or you go down, and I'm not going down. I'd rather sacrifice your mental well-being than sacrifice my own. And that point of the movie to me showed that Cam was entering a level of inhumanity in order to really become him. Theme 3, white supremacy and the powers that be. Earlier in the show, I said that I feel that American football is rooted in white supremacy. And that's because part of American culture is football, but America's culture is rooted in white supremacy. So any extinction of American culture is going to have a significant component of white supremacy. With that being said, the fact that the owners of the Savior football team had scouted and had their eyes on Cam since he was a child, there was an entitlement they felt to Cam. They felt like they owned him. And I feel that that replicates into reality. I think that a lot of these football owners feel like they own those on their football teams. Cam getting whacked in the head at the beginning of the movie was very intentional, and I think it was done by the powers that be on purpose. Similarly to Isaiah getting his leg broken, I feel like they both sustained injuries that propelled their career. Isaiah broke his leg and after that became him. And I think that Cam's injury, head injury, was a replica of that, where there needed to be some kind of physical ailment so that the saviors could save them and get them looped into that blood transfusion kind of deal. In order for these athletes to become the star quarterback, they first needed for them to become dependent on the savior football team in a certain way. And the best way to do that was through physical ailment. So often in our history, the best way that white people have been able to leech off of us as a community is to create a need or a sense of dependency on them to survive in a way that didn't have to exist. Now let's talk about Isaiah's wife. I think it is interesting that in this movie, Isaiah's wife was white and he was black. And in the end of the movie, we find out that she had a really hefty hand in all of the behind the scenes schemery that was happening. And to me, that's not very far fetched from reality. I do believe that when it comes to the black athlete, white wife dynamic in football, a lot of these white wives are in on it behind the scenes. Meaning, a lot of these white girls in college are scouting out to see which black boys are the most promising in football. And once they secure those athletes, they begin to hang out after practice. They'll even offer to write their papers for them, do their homework for them. They'll bring food post-practice. They will lure these black athletes in with these kind favors, all in an effort to eventually marry them to get the accolades, the access, the notoriety and such. But there is a system happening there. And of course, it is not every case. Some of them, it is love, whoop-de-doo. But for a lot of them, there is a systematic means to an end there. In the football arena, there is this aspect of mutual exploitation. However, I do think that the white women exploit black men first. But what I didn't know about, which is a story that I'm glad that Marlon Wayne's character shared in the movie, was the story about how Native Americans dominated the methodical aspect of football against white athletes, and how they essentially created the forward pass, and how devastating it was to white athletes, and how this Native American football team went from dominating against these white college athletes to white people turning Native Americans into a mascot. That, I didn't know that history. I didn't know about it. And after watching the movie, I did research and learned more about it. And it's like, wow, I had no idea that there was, for one, Native American roots in football to this iconic, but two, that white people couldn't take losing to Native Americans to the point that not only did they have to change the rules of the game to accommodate white people's shortcomings, but they also had to then turn Native Americans into the mascot. That to me reinforces just how much white supremacy is rooted in the game, that in order for the white athletes to feel better about themselves, they had to change rules around. They had to make Native Americans the mascot that is viewed as entertainment, something that's laughable and not really held in enough high regard for how iconic they were towards the football industry and game itself. White supremacy is very heavily prominent in the game itself, and I don't think as a means to, of course, distract, society doesn't talk about it enough, and we should. Last theme 4, the toxic relationship with fans. The fact that every night so far in the movie, Isaiah leaves to go watch tapes, and we find out at the end of the movie that those tapes is just him watching fans cheer for him. Not only was that a tad narcissistic, but it did highlight the power that fans have towards these athletes. I think a big reason why these athletes are willing to abandon themselves and do such inhumane things is for the satisfaction of their fans. They don't want to let their fans down. And in their defense, I'm sure a stadium full of people who traveled to see you, who paid money to see you, shouting your name in thunderous applause and cheer, if you don't receive the proper kind of therapy to navigate that, I'm sure it creates an immense surge in dopamine and just gives you a rush that you will do crazy things to maintain that kind of rush for. So I don't fully blame athletes for their devotion to their fans. I just think that there needs to be a healthy balance of appreciation, but not desperation to maintain that kind of approval. Because once you prioritize their happiness over yours, you will quickly find yourself forsaking everything about you just to maintain the audience's praises of you. Now, I'm not gonna hold you. That scene of Cam almost killing that fan and then Isaiah popping up and kissing that fan and then killing the fan, that scene was weird. I have been trying to figure out what that scene meant, and I'm still stumped. What I can conclude for the most part is that there is a sick, twisted relationship between athletes and their fans, where there is an admiration for the level of devotion that fans have towards that athlete. But then there is also a fearful or weird apprehension or disgust of, why are you going that hard for me? You know, like the fact that Isaiah kissed the fan, which was ill, I think was him giving her the satisfaction of, you are that dedicated that you made it this far, so I'm going to give you this. But to immediately after that kiss kill her, to me showed this dichotomy of, I admire your devotion, but it's also terrifying and get the fuck away from me. Like, I do think that there is a level of fandom that reaches standom that is dangerous, and the relationship between an athlete and their fans, or any kind of entertainer and their fans, is a very delicate one that could go easily from admiration to possession and obsession. And I think that's what that scene depicted. I'm curious to know what you think it depicted, because I really don't know what to say for it. That scene was just, it was odd. And on top of using your family as pressure, I do think that people around athletes will use the potential of letting your fans down as a means to pressure athletes into doing things they may not want to do. And so because of that, I really don't think that the dynamic between athlete and fan is healthy. I think it is toxic, from the fans' obsessive need, or between the fans obsessing over the athlete and the athlete's fear of letting them down at the expense of themselves. Nothing about it to me is healthy overall. All in all, I thoroughly enjoyed watching him. I found it to be very interesting. I enjoyed the themes and the messaging, and I agreed with it. I enjoyed the ending, because I do believe that in order to dismantle football, something has to die. Not necessarily people, but the powers, the power is what has to die. And I think that's what was depicted in the end scene in a very dramatic way. But I think the message of the end scene was, in order for football to no longer be as powerful as it is, we have to extract the power from it. That's what I got from it. But I don't know how successful that is when football is so closely tied to America. So then the question then becomes, if the answer is to rid itself of power, is that also the answer to get America to a better place? Is it to also rid America of the power that it has wielded for so long? Who knows? But that is all I have for this week's episode. Please, it is your turn to talk to me about it. Tell me in the comment section of this video, what were your thoughts on this episode and on the movie Him? How do you feel about football? Do you believe that it is a good sport to play? Do you also see the violence in the game? And how did you feel about the movie Him? Did you like it? Did you not like it? Be sure to tell me all of your thoughts and opinions in the comment section below. And until next week, y'all be blessed and bless up. Blue 42! Bye!